Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier this Congress, the House unanimously passed my bill, H.R. 2872, the Promoting Hydropower Development at Existing Non-Powered Dams Act. H.R. 2872 would promote hydropower development at existing non-powered dams by establishing an expedited licensing process for qualifying facilities that will result in decision on an application in 2 years or less. The bill also requires FERC, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of the Interior to develop a list of existing non-powered federal dams that have the greatest potential for non-federal hydropower development. Developing hydropower generation at over 50,000 suitable dams across the country has the potential to add 12 gigawatts of clean energy to the grid, create good-paying jobs, and bring billions of dollars of investment. In fact, in the 8th District of Indiana, which I represent, there are 6 suitable dams that can benefit from this expedited permitting process. This legislation modernizes our existing infrastructure and I believe should be included in any infrastructure package passed out of Congress. So, Mr. Devine, in your testimony, you state that enacting legislation like this, in a way, and you quote, in a way to move investments in hydropower infrastructure forward without major cost to the U.S. government. Can you speak to the impact H.R. 72 and other hydropower legislation, but specifically this, would have on hydropower development across the country as well as its role in our country's infrastructure?
Yes, thank you, Congressman Bucshon. I think it's a fine example, an excellent example of trying to improve the investment picture for small hydropower and hydropower in the country. It's also an example of moving forward hydropower at existing dams, recognizes that the main aspect of these dams are usually run-of-river dams. Run-of-river dams are known to have very minor impacts, generally to the water resources of the river. Therefore, 2-year expedited process in this is not incongruent with protecting environmental resources. So I think it's also an example of an expedited process which also continues to protect the environment because these environmental analyses will be done and completed in a reasonable time frame and fully evaluated from a scientific perspective. So I think it also combines the expedited time frame for the licensing process and is a good example of not trying to rescind any environmental laws or regulations. So I think it's a fine example of encouraging new investments in hydropower and recognizing that some of these projects have minimal environmental effects and could move forward expeditiously.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to point out this bill was passed unanimously out of the House with bipartisan support. We worked with both parties to develop language that people were comfortable with. And again, I want to reiterate that the environmental review process is still there in place. We're just getting federal agencies to move the process more quickly rather than 10 years or 12 years to a process that could be over a 2-year period, which the potential for expanding this form of clean energy is tremendous. And I look forward to our Senate colleagues taking this up, and I do think there's a lot of interest over there, and I think in a bipartisan way, I'm hoping to get this type of legislation to the President's desk. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.